Welcome to the Journey to Happy podcast, a podcast dedicated to help you in the process of getting out of your own way and letting go of the mental barriers that have been self-created that stand on the way of you and the emotional freedom and happiness that you so desire. I am Olga, your host, and in here I'm going to offer you raw but real examples that will help you step into the shoes of becoming the CEO of your own life. Because let's face it, in a world where you can be anyone you want, why not promote yourself to the CEO position? I cannot wait to see you inside. Hey guys, welcome to the Journey to Happy podcast. I am Olga, your host, and today I'm here with our guest, Cassandra Shuck. She is a business growth, profitability strategist, a self-proclaimed serial entrepreneur, empowering female entrepreneurs to live the life they want to live. She's the founder of Tola Marketing Creative, a full-service creative digital marketing agency, co-founder of Milking Cookie, a lactation support cookie company for breastfeeding mamas. And she also hosts the Align Profit Impact podcast. Cassandra's love and expertise for finding creative and intuitive solutions has led her to build and grow 8 successful businesses, 4 of which are operational today. And she supports hundreds of entrepreneurs around the globe in growing their own empires in the process. She currently runs all of her businesses from her home just outside Charlotte, North Carolina, only working 25 hours a week while raising her 1.5-year-old daughter, Diana. Guys, the reason I invited Cassandra to this podcast is because I happen to know that behind this highly successful woman, there are some stories of struggle. She has actually been creating and walking through her own journey to come to this happy place she's now on. And I would love for all of you to listen to her wisdom. Cassandra, I am sincerely, extremely thankful for you to come here and share your time and your stories with me and my audience. Welcome.
I am so excited to be here. I feel like it's a long time coming.
I know. So Cassandra and I met in the spring of this year when I went to, where were we? Nashville? No. We were Milwaukee yes. For a business conference. And I basically was obsessed with her from the moment we talked. I'm like, she is such a beautiful soul. I want to talk to her more. So I'm very thankful that you decided to join us. I think that your professional, your career, and also your personal life has so much to add to the world that it's so important to give you the time to share that with all of us. Yes, so where is your little one today?
She is actually in New Hampshire. Grandma came and picked her up, and this is the first time in 21 months, so almost 2 years, that I've not had a child for a whole week.
A whole week? Wow.
Yeah, so my husband and I are doing date nights. We're getting podcasts done that should have been done in April of,
catching up on work
ago, and just getting stuff done and living the single life without a baby right now, which feels very weird.
But are you enjoying it?
I am enjoying it. It was good to kind of reconnect with my husband, do a little bit of extra work, a little bit of self-care time, kind of all of those things that are on the to-do list that just get pushed down more and more and more when you're a mama. Yeah. It's kind of nice to catch up on some of those.
You know what? Maybe we can talk about that in a little bit, because that's actually what the majority of the clients who I coach are moms or caregivers who have completely forgotten about themselves in the process of caring for somebody else.
Yes. And I did that for the first 13 months of her life. And it's been, I would say, from month 13 or 14 thereabout to now where she is at 21 months, kind of refinding myself, rediscovering certain pieces of me that I just kind of let go.
Did you know you were going to be this kind of mom?
No. So yes and no. I actually thought I was starting my marketing agency so I could be a stay-at-home mom. And I quickly realized that that is not my life. That is not what I am good at. That is not my strong suit. I am a great mom for 5 hours a day, but I am a awful mom when it comes to 18 hours a day. So for the first year, I stayed at home, and then kind of past that, she's now in childcare, which has been very life-giving because I do love what I do for work. So she goes to childcare for about 20, 25 hours a week, and that's my kind of work time.
And you time. So, okay, this is very interesting because I think that I don't know that I would agree with you that you would be an awful mom for 18 hours, but I sincerely appreciate
my views getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and my patience getting thinner and thinner, and the need for a glass of wine getting stronger and stronger.
Or to scream, somebody help me. So this is amazing. It's amazing. I appreciate the honesty because I think there's so much taboo about being a good mom, a good professional, a good wife that very few people actually say, honestly, if we were to I optimize my time as a mom, this is my max, 5 hours, which is interesting because we do that with other jobs that we do.
Yeah.
Right. Like
we do it with everything else. But I feel like as soon as you become a mom, you're expected to be on 24/7.
And perfect.
100%. So, and I have a daughter who's exactly like me.
Ouch.
Who's very headstrong, who's very outgoing, who's very type A personality. She will pick up her cup and it has to go in her cup holder. And I'm like, where did you get that from? And I'm looking next to me and I have my water bottle and it has to be on my coaster. So I literally birthed my twin, which is my bless my poor husband's heart. But I birthed my twin and I know that she does the things that I do, but they annoy me more because I do them.
It's so true, right? She's mirroring back at you. And
100%.
I remember reading that quote once where I think, I don't remember verbatim by word, but it's all about those who annoy you are reflecting something that you do. And exactly. I'm impossible.
Total projection.
Yeah, it's not amazing. So you've been a mom for 21 months and you're running this business. I'm very curious because I'm about to become a mom. And that has been a fear for me. And I think that for many other women that I've talked to, how do you balance it? How do you balance mom life, work life, and keep sane?
So I just did a podcast and it was talking about how I actually don't believe there's such a thing as balance.
Awesome.
And what it is that you think you're going to be doing going in and what you think it's going to look like, it doesn't necessarily look like it. So I thought I would be a full-time stay-at-home mom and a full-time business owner. Ha ha ha. And I thought I would work during nap times only. And I thought, I'd be the mom. I don't know if you follow Busy Toddler on Instagram.
Yep.
If not, you totally should.
Yep.
But I thought I'd be that type of mom who has all the activities of dumping water from cup to cup and sorting colorful grains of rice. And I'm I can't. I can do it for a small percentage of time, but I can't do it kind of in its fullness and in its entirety. So for me, right now, my kind of life looks a little bit strange. I do have multiple businesses, which I know you had mentioned, but my main business is Tola Marketing and Creative. It's a full service marketing agency for female entrepreneurs. And that's something that is now 11 years old. And I've grown and started to remove myself from that business. It's still functioning. There's still 20 people actually that work for that business.
Wow.
But I've slowly removed myself kind of piece by piece and started farming out what I know are my strong suits to other people within the organization. So A, that business is making me money, but B, I'm not the sole lifeblood for that business. So I have other energies to give elsewhere.
That's amazing.
Yes.
That's amazing. So I need to pick your brain on that later. And so, okay, so you have 4 businesses. You have a husband. You have a type A toddler. And you have you to take care of. And you don't believe in balance, which I think I really love that concept because we're always trying to be perfect. So we're always trying to do the same amount of things. We're always trying to be okay, I have the perfect Zen life. I work teaching mindfulness and meditation.
Yeah, of course.
And that's one of the myths that I'm always trying to debunk is there isn't such a state of mind that you keep forever and ever. So if you don't believe in balance, what do you aim for in your life?
So I actually think of everything being whether or not it's a priority. So I just did an interview the other day and I called it, if everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority.
Yeah, I saw that.
Because we as women have a tendency to say this season, whatever, my self-care is important. My family's important, my sleep's important, my job's important, listing 37 things out that are all priorities and all are important. So what I've actually done in the past, I would say probably close to a year and a half, is start to strip away and figure out what's truly important and what it is that I want to leave for legacy, what it is I want to do to have my impact reach larger, and really start stripping away the things that don't matter. Mm. So, and really get clear on what my priority is for me, for a season, for a year, for whatever. But then also we take that a level deeper and we do it for the businesses. Yeah. And there's sometimes where it's a weak priority of just self-care and just quiet and stillness.
So what helps you determine those priorities? Like I'm listening, listening to you, thinking of my clients, be like, everything is that priority for my perfectionists. Yeah. They'll be thinking like, no, I've got to do it all or else, I have nothing to show. So what helps you kind of go from broad to narrow in that decision?
So I'm super analytical and super number oriented. So honestly, I figure out my business priorities and I color code my calendar. So I know, for instance, if it's a self-care week or a self-care season, or I just am feeling a little low energy and I have one self-care out of 170 meetings, I know I'm not making that truly a priority. So for me, it's honestly a system of checks and balances to kind of like make sure I'm staying in alignment and true to what it is I say is actually a priority.
So what's your accountability? What helps you or what reminds you to go back into that color-coded calendar and be like, wait a second, I've only got 1 hour of self-care? Because it's so easy to just not notice it, right? So what keeps you kind of checking back in with yourself and being like, well, I need a week of relaxing?
So I actually do a decent amount of still time in the morning. So I wake up super early, but I'm not necessarily like active. I'm like, I will sit there and do meditation, or I will read, or I will kind of ground and center myself first. Mm-hmm. So I can figure out what comes up for me that's truly a priority
on that day.
And yeah, exactly. On that day. So I do it on a daily basis. We do it on a weekly basis with my team. So I have an event coming up in September. And we know that the weeks leading up to it, our business priority is solely event. We're not going to launch anything cool for the cookie company. We're not going to do where it'll be like bare bones for all the other businesses, because we know what our priority is for that particular month. So we kind of do it on a daily basis for myself. We do it on a weekly basis for my team. And then we do it on a quarterly basis for the company. Mm-hmm. And then I haven't gotten to yearly basis just because that seems so far out.
Yeah. Yeah, you can. But I love that you check in with yourself every day. Did you learn this somewhere? Where did you catch that on?
Honestly, I think I started it when I was in yoga teacher training, to be honest with you. Because during any sort of YTT, you end up going through such a mindset shift and such a revolutionary process.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
That you have to like get really quiet and listen to what's coming up, to what you need to like attend to. So I found that translating that practice kind of into the business practice, I've had a lot of success with.
Wait, so you're also a yoga teacher?
Yes, I am.
And you teach on a regular basis?
I don't teach on a regular basis. I practice on a daily basis, but I do not teach on a regular basis anymore. I taught up until I was 8 months pregnant. I taught prenatal. And then I think I've taught like 2 classes since then. And honestly, it was like riding a bicycle again, but being a little shaky. I'm like, oh, what's that word? Chaturanga Dandasana. Okay, now bring it back.
Yeah, I actually taught a class last Friday and I did it with my students. And oh boy, the months that I've been pregnant and I have not been practicing, I felt it. My body was definitely crying for stretching.
I get that.
So yeah, I agree. Great mind shifts came from my yoga training. Mm-hmm. And I love that, like, mindfulness was one of those for you, because that quiet moment in the morning definitely spells mindfulness all over. And I love that you connect to yourself to then just guide the process of the day, what's going to be the process.
And there's been some days where it slipped and then you feel it. You feel the resistance. You feel not being clear. You feel every little speed bump along the way. So it's kind of my own accountability. I'm like, well, I don't want to feel this way. And I don't feel this way if I do it. So, time to get my butt down to a pillow or to the floor or to the mat, like to actually, keep myself accountable.
And so do you have any techniques that help you, or any red flags that you're like, I'm slipping off, like I need to come back to it?
So honestly, if I I have a tendency to throw out a ton of stuff to my team just because we work very, very fast paced. Mm-hmm. So I know if I'm throwing like rapid fire, like projecting onto my team of like, oh, we need to get this done. Like, here's, 17 to-do lists. I know it's generally something inside that's not like fully baked. So that's when I'm like, okay, I'll see you guys in a couple minutes. I'm going to go take a walk around the block. I'm going to go get a glass of water. we're going to have a little quick dance party.
Okay. So lots of self-awareness. That's amazing.
We're going to sage the shit out of myself.
I love sage with all my heart. Yes.
So I'm like, something needs to change in this energy and in this space. And my whole team is super sensitive to that as well. So it's really nice that they're like, okay, Cass, you need to go fix this.
Yes. I like it. I love the honesty. I'm really appreciating the honesty. Oh yeah, I was going to say over we were talking before we got live on this podcast that for those of you who don't know, I'm currently 8 months pregnant, and Cassandra was asking me how I'm feeling, and I was expressing that I'm noticing my anxiety going up, which I've read everywhere is kind of normal, especially for somebody like me who has had a history of anxiety. But that's when I noticed that the things that I usually do to keep myself sane, I've been skipping on doing because I've got such a close deadlines, tight deadlines about the things that I need to do before I give birth, that I postponed my meditation. And so it was that awareness and bringing that back with grace, not with like, oh my God, a meditation teacher that forgets to meditate, but more from that place of like, that makes sense. So I got to get back to it. So I was on your About website, and something really caught my eye. And I think that's one of the reasons I really loved you from the first moment I met you, is that one, you're always so honest, you're always so genuine, but we share some heart-to-heart conversations at the time. And I felt like, wow, this woman is amazing, because I know that you've overcome difficult moments in your life. And I feel that you've used those moments to fuel yourself with power and courage, which I'm sure hasn't come just overnight, that you've probably done some intense work to get there. You say in here, for as long as I can remember, I've always been really good at the hustle. And in the spirit of being totally honest, then you say, where I grew up, I didn't feel safe and loved. And that just brought up to me the importance of bringing people like yourself into this podcast. Because I think that there is a misunderstanding in our community, in our society, that most people who are successful come from success, have always been successful, have always had people guiding them, showing them, giving them the perfect example. And when I read a phrase like, where I grew up, I didn't feel safe and loved, I did child protection services for 10 years as a social worker. So my mind goes to a place, right? Like, where I understand, I've met people, I've met children who may have felt that way. And I've always noticed that there's a big difference between those who are resilient and those who were not. And clearly, I'm not jumping to conclusions to know what you went through, but to me, you're resilient because you are where you are today. So just, do you mind telling us a little bit about at what point did you, having come from this background, did you decide that your life was going to look different, that you were going to feel loved and saved?
So I would actually say it was an awareness when I was a child. So I was a super empathic, super energy-centric child, and I had parents who were severe drug addicts. They didn't understand anything really about empathy, really about energy, emotion, etc. I was kind of born into a family that said, children should be seen and not heard. And that really didn't resonate with me from a young age, which caused some physical abuse, some mental abuse, and then sexual abuse as a child. So I kind of endured that from age about 5 through 15. But I really knew, probably in the heart of hearts, that around age 10, I was going to take what I was given, basically the shitstorm of my childhood, and I was going to put it to good use, and I was going to put it for the greater good. I think on that About page 2, I mentioned that I had started my first business at the age of 7.
Yes. What was it?
So I made jewelry, and I had like retailers and wholesale pricing, and like, it wasn't your standard like 7-year-old lemonade stand. I was in like 13 different stores with all my like little jewelry that I'd made. Do you remember like the hemp macrame stuff?
Yep.
Yeah. It was stuff like that. Total like hippy dippy, like 80s child, stuff like that.
So you say this mindset started in your childhood, that you decided that you were going to use this like as fuel basically and like change things around?
Yeah, so it started out as a survival mentality and survival mode. And then I quickly realized that once I started, it's funny because when you go in an abusive family and when you grow up in an abusive household, you don't realize that some of this stuff isn't normal.
Right.
So you start talking to friends, and honestly, it was around the age of 10, I was talking to friends and I said, oh, like when you disagree with your parents, you don't get beat up? And they're like, no, that's not normal. And I'm like, it's normal in my house. Like, I don't understand. So I think that's when things started to click in place for me of saying like, okay, like my situation is not normal, but it's been what I've been dealt.
It's your normal. Yeah,
exactly.
Wow. First of all, I'm thankful that you're being so open, and I'm also sorry that you had to go through that. And, having gone through myself, like interesting life stories, to put it in a nice word. I find that the most beautiful people are the ones that have overcome big hurdles. And like, obviously you had massive ones to walk through, and you've done it. So like a huge, hug and applause. And, just, I feel so proud of what you are and what you decided to do. What do you think made the difference for you, other than like obviously that first shock of realizing, okay, my normal isn't normal? What influenced you positively along the way? What do you think helped shape you into making better choices for yourself?
So I think just being exposed to that and then learning that there was another way to do things was a huge piece of that. What's that?
Who was teaching you that there was another way to do things?
So I had a couple really, really good mentors when I was a younger kid in school. For those, what's funniest little fun fact is actually I dropped out of high school. I don't have a high school diploma. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree hanging on the wall, but I still don't have a GED or high school diploma or anything of that nature. But I had a few really good mentors along the way who said, like, this is not the way, this is not your path. They really saw and truly understood like what I was capable of. One of them actually was my high school band director, who signed my student loans for me to go to college when I was 16 years old.
Amazing.
And she was super, super empowering to women, like worked for all sorts of crazy women-centric, children-centric things. So she was one of the ones who was like a real, true, clear mentor. But then I forget how old I was. I was in high school, probably around 14 or 15. I started doing FBLA. Do you remember that? Future Business Leaders of America?
No, because I'm in Canada. And I was in Colombia anyway by the time I was in high school. So no, I don't remember that.
Okay. Well, there was this group that was called Future Business Leaders of America. And they were the first ones that really introduced like entrepreneurship to me. Awesome. Of like, you can live the life that you want to create. You can kind of make a business out of a passion or something of that nature. So that's really when I started going, oh, I can do something that's not like by the book, which is really funny because I know that I had that awareness, but that didn't stop me from going like by the book for, oh goodness, probably close to 12 years, 10 years thereabouts, where I was like, okay, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to get a job. I'm going to go into corporate. I'm going to rise up the ranks. And it's funny because I knew that there was something that wasn't in alignment as I kind of went through this corporate journey.
Yeah.
So one day I literally quit because I realized, you're going to laugh at this, I was looking for love from my parents again. I worked for their favorite company, doing what job they would have loved to do, traveling around, driving their favorite car. And I was like, this is bullshit.
I'm so happy you made that connection as a social worker, as a therapist, as a life coach. But also I'm so happy you're bringing it up here because this is something that I coach people on constantly, finding out that blueprint of emotions that we all have and how we try time after time to rebuild that, but make it better this time. So in your case, you were still looking for that love and affection from your parents or approval, as if any of what happened had been your fault at all, to not have been loved and accepted the way you should have been. So
and that's still something we work on to this day.
Yes. That's amazing. That's amazing. So do you keep a relationship with your parents today?
No, I don't. My father, I haven't had a relationship since I was about 15 years old. And my mom and I have kind of had an off and on relationship. it's actually what I'm in the process of writing a book on, because it's so much easier to get over like physical abuse and mental abuse versus to get over kind of the mind games that happen when you have someone who's watching and witnessing but not doing anything about it. So that's part of the journey that I'm going through now, is that I'm actually kind of rediscovering and writing a book, just because we don't talk about that side of things. We're now in a culture that will talk about the abuse.
Yeah.
We won't talk about kind of those bystanders that played such a critical role.
Well, because that's sort of betrayal and injustice and so many other emotions that you have to go, like the perpetrator, you kind of figure they're a bad person, but what about the person watching and not doing anything about it?
And for me, that didn't come up for me at all. I didn't realize that was a thing until I had my daughter. And then I swear, like a switch was flipped, or something was like completely illuminated, where I'm like, hold on. Like, and I think it's because I finally understood that the love that a parent should have for a child, with her and her being a girl as well, I kind of understood like that mother-daughter bond. And I'm like, wait, this was not what I had. This, again, it was kind of one of those other moments where I'm like, this isn't normal. Like, hold on a second.
It's amazing. So this is a personal book story that you're writing about?
It is. Yeah. It's in the process. I don't know when it'll come out. I don't know how much. All I know is I was led to write it, and I'm now sitting there and writing.
And for you, as well as anybody listening, writing is such a therapeutic tool.
It absolutely is.
Because you just go and process, right? But essentially, we don't write without processing. We have to process what we're writing. So I think that's really amazing. I also want to go back briefly, because in my years as a child protection worker, something that I noticed time after time for anybody listening is that it only takes one person in the life of a child to be of a good influence for that child to build resiliency. And Cassandra, you expressed that like it was the person in your high school band.
High school band director.
Who like believed in you and told you, no, you can do it. And that was enough for you to hold on to that, even though mom and dad, the people who are supposed to love you and protect you the most, were failing you in that sense, that this one person was influential to you. And as adults, anybody listening, just know that you can be that person to any child. And you have no idea when you're influencing somebody to just make a better choice later on in life and believe in themselves. Have you been thinking that it's time to join a gym membership, only that for your mindset? Have you been wanting to be a part of a community where your self-growth is what's being supported? Do you want to have a life coach in your back pocket, easy to reach at any given point? If you've been thinking that this is something for you, Reset Your Mindset might be exactly what you're looking for. It's my newest membership program where you have me on a regular basis answering your questions, where you will get monthly mindset trainings with some of my best tools and most recurring theme subjects in my coaching practice. You will also receive a work along workbook to move along, and you will have Zoom group calls with me to get your questions answered and to process some of those heavier emotions that you just don't know what to do about. If this sounds interesting to you, check out my website at www.olgasway.com and look for Reset Your Mindset membership program. I cannot wait to see you inside. So one thing is to go through like hell in life and try to pick up the pieces. And something else, even for those who didn't grow up with trauma or abuse, to sit down and say like, wait a second, I'm not at the top of my game. I want to get there and I believe I can do it. How the heck did you do that? How did you go from skipping high school or not finishing high school to then like making it all the way up in the corporate world to being like, screw this, I'm opening my own business, not 1, 8 for that matter, and then succeed?
So I would actually say it's the way it started and the way it ended are a little bit different. So the way it started, it was me proving my father wrong. So he said, women should be seen and not heard. You should go get married, get pregnant, have babies. Like my mom had to be a stay-at-home mom, like just a different kind of mentality. So that's what I was preached. That's what was preached to me. That's what I was taught. And the initial round of kind of success, I guess you could say, was like, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to show you that it's not that way. And then honestly, it moved from, I'm going to show you it's not that way to, okay, I'm going to now start to figure out what's in alignment for me and what it is that like really truly lights me up versus just kind of throwing a big giant middle finger to my family life. Because that's honestly what it started out being, even though I didn't realize it at the time. And then it kind of moved and morphed into, okay, now I'm not the only one. I'm not the only female girl who was told she couldn't do something. And then I started listening and tuning into kind of all of my clients' stories, all of like my girlfriend's stories. And there's always someone who puts that limiting belief on them. It's not something that they're born with. Like they weren't born into the world saying like, I'm not worthy. Like that's not a thing.
No.
Someone gave them that and then they kind of held on to it. So that's now my kind of role is I'm helping other women express and kind of release those limiting beliefs that someone put on them somewhere in their life.
That's amazing. It's so amazing. You're so much more amazing than I thought. You really are. Like every layer I get to meet you, I'm like, wow, amazing. Amazing. I love that because, and let's maybe talk a little bit about that because this is what you coach people on. And quite honestly, when I do life coaching, that's basically what I go back to is like these blueprints, these beliefs that they may have about themselves that came from a misconception and doesn't serve them. So what are some of your strategies? What do you tell women who walk around thinking something about themselves that is not true? What are some of the strategies you guide them through to say, I am worthy?
So it's funny because most of my women actually don't come to me and say like, I'm not worthy.
No, yeah.
They come to me and they're like, my business isn't profitable.
Right.
And so like for me, my life, you could say like life coaching is actually through business coaching. I don't claim, I don't want to be a life coach. But as we start peeling back kind of the layers of the business and getting to like the root, I'm a fan of looking at the root cause of something. That's when we start to see like, oh, you're not making money because you're not asking for the money, because you had a money issue. Because, for instance, one of my clients, she was abused, and every time she was abused, someone gave her money. So she had a bad connotation to money. So she's no, of course her business isn't profitable. She feels dirty when she's accepting money for business.
Right.
We kind of get to that root cause and continue to drill down. I continue to ask questions deeper and deeper and deeper till we get to why is it that kind of your state of the union is the way that it is.
Right. And how do you help them move from that? So once they have the understanding, this is okay. So I didn't realize that what I call my blueprint, that my belief was that I'm not worthy of love or worthy. Then what?
So I love breaking things into small, manageable chunks. So if I'm like, okay, you don't think you're worthy of love, like, what is the big grandiose vision? Maybe you want to get on stage and you think there'll be tons of people surrounding you and you want to be a speaker. Well, we don't start with that, because to go from where you're at now to kind of that big, like, 20,000 foot level vision, there's a lot of kind of micro steps. So maybe like for someone like that, if it's their grandiose vision is being on stage with, being a Tony Robbins, selling out stadiums, maybe we start with like, okay, well, let's get you in front of 10 people. Let's get you a podcast. Let's have you start talking and curating and opening up and telling your kind of piece of the story. And then maybe it's, let's do a small event, maybe like do a retreat with 10 women and see how that feels, and kind of like micromanage the steps up to their vision, but always keeping their vision in line. And then noticing, honestly, part of my thing for my women is noticing where their body is constricting when they're doing these steps. So like, there's a lot of steps in here that just don't feel comfortable. So it's really staying grounded, staying present, staying kind of aware, and then moving through those kind of steps and those processes. And then again, myself, I'm doing it through a business lens. So how can we make these steps? How can we make your business more profitable by like incremental steps?
Right. One of my good friends is a money coach, and she talks a lot about that same idea of the relationship we have with money has everything to do with the relationship we have with ourselves. And I think it's interesting how you bring that into business. Yeah.
Her and I actually have very, very similar like kind of processes and mentalities and paths.
Yeah.
So it's, I completely understand that. And yes.
Which I find so interesting because, you know, when I first started to think about opening my own business, I thought to myself, a social worker has no business in business. Like, what am I doing in business? And then I realized the correlation was massive because the field in which I'm in of self-improvements and self-growth and business owners is pretty much the same. To be a good business, successful business person, you have to be in alignment with yourself.
Exactly.
You know, you stand for what you believe in and your values, and your platform is going to be so much easier if you have a stronger relationship with self. So I see that.
And it's so funny because being a serial entrepreneur and owning multiple businesses, I remember the first time I said this, but I got asked in a Q&A panel and they're like, well, you're a serial entrepreneur, so you must have come from a family of entrepreneurs. And I kind of paused and laughed. And I'm like, yeah, they were entrepreneurs if you count like the drugs they were selling. But like, it was not modeled for me. And like, so it's interesting that we have these like stigmas, especially around like stepping into a business, but B, like your true purpose and power.
Yeah.
That it had to be modeled for you perfectly before you can actually do it. And that's bullshit.
That is bullshit. I come from a family of scholars, you know, like my mom is a lawyer. My dad is an MBA, you know, like I come from a family who has believed for years and generations, you have to go to school, you have to have a master's, you have to have a PhD, you know, study as much as you can to be somebody. And,
exactly.
And I'm an entrepreneur.
All those credentials at the end of your name equal who you are. Yeah.
And I use none of that. You know, I don't use any of my credentials. Nobody ever has asked me what credentials I have before they work with me. They just love the work. And like, honestly, I think the best university I've ever attended has been my own life. That's where I've learned the most. And like, you sound the same.
100%. And no one's ever asked me for my high school diploma either.
No. So you're good. And you went to college and university, which sometimes they do ask for that.
Yeah.
So, Cassandra, were there any moments in your life where you had to take a look at your mindset and shift it? You're like, okay, this way I'm thinking, absolutely not helpful.
I think more so in personal life than in business, which always, if my personal life was a disaster, so are my businesses.
Right.
So I was actually previously married before the man I was married now. And I remember going through just some personal hell with, you know, infidelity and child loss and all sorts of crazy things. And I remember kind of my mindset from my business just being a very like blah, very F it, very this isn't worth it, very negative. So again, it definitely was, they're tied together wholeheartedly.
Mm-hmm. So what helped you make that shift in those moments when you obviously life wasn't going well, marriage wasn't going well, you know, profession wasn't going well, and you're like, wait a second, something's got to give here. Mm-hmm. What brought you up to have the courage maybe to make those changes?
So I think honestly, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning, where I kind of removed myself from the situation and got quiet with myself.
Okay.
And figured out like, what is my true north? Like, what is my purpose? Like, why are these things happening to me? And then honestly, for me, it was, what am I doing to have these be continuing repeating patterns in my life?
Of abuse and
really truthfully honest on that.
Yeah, that makes perfect. And that shows how intelligent you are. Because
it also shows that is not a fun path, honestly, though, and it's not a fun piece to walk on. Like, I remember there being some really, really, really hard times in that kind of season of my life.
I love that you're calling it a season. I think that most of us, when we're going through a rough time, we forget that it's just a phase in our lives and that we're going to keep walking through that, and that at some point we're going to look back and hopefully, if we've done the right work, we're going to look for the lessons that we learned and just almost think like that was a blessing in disguise, right? That we went through that.
One of my mentors about 10 years ago told me that your lows equal your highs and your highs equal your lows. So it was funny because I remember going through this and being like, oh, it's been low after low, like hit after hit, like something's got to give, something's got to be good and, you know, of equal or greater value. Mm-hmm. So I remember just kind of like coaching and like mentally like pushing myself to make it through those kind of that season.
Yeah. I think of life as a pendulum. And so when I go through a really happy time, I'm like, store some of these memories in your soul, because when the pendulum goes the other way, you're going to want to remember that life has the potential to be really good as well.
Mm-hmm. And then on the flip side, it totally helps too to just prepare you for the hard seasons that are going to continue to come. You know, when you're in that happy piece, you're like, okay, it's good. And then it's funny because you don't want to go kind of too far, which I did for a little bit, where I'm like, oh God, if it's this good, it's going to get real bad. Like,
yeah, you don't want to do that. You just want to be in the present. So mindfulness will say to us, don't attach to anything. Don't attach to the happy moments, because the happy moments then we're like, please last forever. I want this to last forever. Nothing does. Just arrive to that moment and kind of like be, right? Like that. This is for our listeners to just like.
But if it lasts forever, it's no longer happy and joy-filled as it once was. So
exactly. Yeah, it's so true. So in that, like building of resiliency and like just being so, I feel that you have a personality of pushing through. People putting limiting beliefs in our minds is one thing, but we have a choice, and we can choose to continue to believe what those words, the words that were said to us, or the limitations that were said to us. I personally, this is very personal to me, those are words of encouragement for me. You know, I remember the doctor who told me, you will never be able to have a baby. You may as well just adopt.
Exactly.
And I remember thinking, no, I don't think so. You are not going to be the person telling me when and how I become a mother. Yep. And it was so important for me to make that choice in that moment, because he said the magic words, you can't. To me, that's like motivation of, like you were saying, giving the middle finger to your family. Not so much, but like that bit of anger and empowerment, I make my life. Thank you.
You find your like inner fire when someone says that to you. So like, you can't have a baby. It's like, I can and I will, and watch me.
Watch me. 100%.
You have a successful business and a successful marriage and a child. I can, I will, and watch me.
So
it's always been my click.
So for me, that was my dad. My dad is like extremely disciplined in his mind. This guy is 70. I was having breakfast with him today. He's 73 years old, about to be 74. And this morning he went to run 10 kilometers like he does every morning. And he was saying, oh my God, I'm deteriorating. I'm going downhill. I'm not as fast. I'm tired when I come back home. Whereas before I used to run 20 kilometers and I would feel this tired at 20 kilometers. And I was like, Dad, you're amazing. Like, you know how
73.
Exactly. How many 73 years old can say that they went and run 10 kilometers this morning just for fun? Yeah. So he has always modeled for me this kind of like, I can, I will, watch me.
Yeah.
But he's also been the person who tells me, and I think purposely, oh, I don't think you can do that. Like, you know, I remember when he told me I couldn't run a half marathon. Oh my God, I purposely ran that half marathon just to take a photo and be like, I did it.
That's when you run the full marathon instead of the half. You're like, I couldn't run the half, but I did run the full.
You were right after all. Yes. So for me, it's easy to link it back to this influence in my life who I've had, you know, since I remember. And he hasn't purposely tried to teach me this. He's just been that. So I've learned by example. But for listeners who are listening to this and like, well, Olga, I didn't have your dad. Obviously, you didn't have that type of relationship with your family. So do you think this is still from this person in your school? Or where do you think you mastered this like mental or mindset that helps you use these things that have happened in your life that have been, I mean, many people will end up in, you know, a shelter or into drugs and alcohol to cope with the trauma, or in prison. You're right. And you instead chose the other way. And I know that takes a lot of courage and many other things have to line up. What would you say has been your key to that success?
So honestly, I feel like it's part of my personality. I don't feel like there's an exact key. I'm a type 7 Enneagram, if you follow that.
Yeah, I do.
If you look at the whole human design, I'm a manifester. Mm-hmm. So I feel like I was kind of born into doing that. Mm-hmm. I don't feel like it was modeled. And like I said, I feel like for me too, it really started off genuinely as a way to kind of prove myself and as a way to defy kind of the situation that I was in. So I'm also a rebel tendency. So that plays a fact into it too. I'm like, oh, this is what I was given, but like, watch me turn it into something great. And I will say too, actually, what's just coming through is I was introduced to, I don't know, kind of the religious aspect of things. I was actually dropped off at CCDs and Bible studies and things like that, just as a cheap form of childcare. So I think that was modeled a little bit in there as well, that there was something bigger, something greater, something kind of more powerful out there.
That's amazing. I am going to just touch base on that because I noticed in America, you guys are far more religious than on this side of the border. We're more open-minded, less attached to a religion, although there's all religions in here. I was raised definitely Catholic, and I do think that looking back in my childhood, that belief was huge psychological help for me to know that there was something greater than me that could create miracles. Like that was so powerful to me. Like something somehow, there's somebody somehow looking after me, and I gotta trust that.
Exactly. And it's, I mean, it really goes across. So my mom's Catholic, my dad's Russian Orthodox and Jewish. So it's funny because I was always realized that it's kind of, and now looking at it, it's, you know, whether you say God, spirit, mother nature, universe, whatever the case is, that was introduced. And I think that was also a small catalyst really I remember actually sitting there and some of the first early things that I was dropped off at, again, for free childcare, and saying like, because they were talking about like, you know, Heavenly Father loves you. And I was like, he doesn't love me. If he loved me, he'd stop this, you know, crap that's going on in my house. And I remember being really, really resistant to it for the first couple of years of it being introduced, just because I couldn't understand why it was happening to me.
Yeah, and children are egocentric, so they blame themselves for everything. Like
100%,
this must be my fault somehow, which is what I help adults undo.
Yeah, of course, you're getting in touch with that inner child piece that's still like heavily clung to.
Yes. So I think this is very important for our listeners. I am not a religious person. I don't practice any religion to this date, except that I come to my yoga practice. I come to my meditation. I come to my quiet time. I connect to myself. I connect to the divine in me. Every single religion states that every single one of them, that we were made out of, that there's divine in us, out of whoever it is that they worship and believe. And so I think that this is such a incredible point to make for anybody who's struggling. Connect to your spirituality, whatever that looks like. Connect to a greater source of hope that can help you kind of, release some of your worries or give you some trust that, and I always tell people, if you can't trust people, trust life. You know, life is here to just guide you through this process, your own journey. And like, if you don't believe in that, listen to Cassandra's story, listen to my story. We can all tell you how like life has slowly brought us back to exactly where we need to be. So that's amazing.
I'm going to just dovetail off that for a second too. I feel like, especially on my side of the border in the US, we have to attach to some like one thing, which doesn't make sense to me. I mean, if you walk in my house, like I have a Buddha immediately when you walk in on the floor. I have a cross. I have Ganesh, you know, in a window. I have crystals throughout, things of that nature. So I have all of kind of my pieces that make me me. And I feel like that so often people, when it comes to anything religious, spiritual, etc., they feel like they have to go all into one piece.
Right.
Versus figuring out like what resonates with them, what, you know, makes their heart feel open, like which pieces actually will help them on a daily basis.
Yeah, I agree. I've studied mostly Buddhism because of my interest in mindfulness. I don't follow it. I don't believe in like that I can reincarnate into an animal. Like that doesn't make sense to me, but all of Buddha's teachings make perfect sense to me. To me, he was a psychologist. Like I love reading parts of the Bible. Like some make no sense, but others I'm like, this is brilliant. And I've read parts of the Quran, and I believe in Mother Mary, for example. I think she's the mom of all moms because my mom believes in her. So that's almost like a tradition or a culture that I choose to keep believing in. Bottom line, believe in anything that gives you hope. Believe in anything that makes you feel that you are supported. If those are crystals, then hold on to those crystals. If that's a cross, hold on to that cross. It does not matter. Just fill yourself up with supports, whether they're physical or material.
Metaphysical.
Metaphysical that we can trust and put our heart to. what do you continue to struggle with, Cassandra? Is there anything that you're like, I'm still working on this? And I'm sorry if I'm making you vulnerable here, but I like my audience to know that we can be successful and still be working on our self growth.
Oh yeah. So I feel like, and I always say this, I feel like the more quote unquote successful you get, the more all of your junk shows up. I feel like right now what I'm working on is I have an event in September and I have severe abandonment issues of like my family didn't show up to dance recitals, soccer games, college graduations, weddings, anything. So I'm like, well, what makes, me special that I could put on this event for female entrepreneurs that they'd show up for me? So that's something that I'm still working through now, especially like being where I'm 6 weeks out from the event. It's coming up a little bit more and more every day. And it's kind of something that I'm working through from a therapy perspective, from a healer. I'm working with an intuitive healer as well with some things called Psych K and EMDR, and pulling out kind of all the tools in the toolbox, like holding on to the crystals, the cross, the sage, the oil, like all the things to try to kind of clear that piece up, because it just keeps getting more. And, as an entrepreneur, especially, or really stepping into anything, I would say that is your true purpose and power, all of your stuff comes up. It's like holding a mirror to all of the stuff you still hold on that is not serving you.
Mm-hmm. So first of all, people who show up to your program or to your event will show up for themselves, not for you. And if you're able to separate that you're showing up to your event because that makes you happy and that everybody's doing that for themselves, because whether we like it or not, we're all selfish. We're thinking of ourselves. And that's a beautiful thing. I want people to be selfish. I want people to be selfful and take care of their needs first and foremost. And I take my hat off to you for going deep into this work and not just like, oh, I'm just stressed about this event. You actually went to the core. You're like, this is an emotional problem. Exactly. And something needs healing in my heart, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to heal that. So that's beautiful. That's powerful.
And it's also totally 100% self, like pushed on myself. Like no one said I have to sell. No one said I have to have, 120 people in the room. That is a number that I chose, that I picked out, that I put upon myself. So it's funny because I look back at it like throughout this whole thing and I'm like, it's my choice. I've literally made all of these choices, all of these decisions that led me to here. Like, why am I now using it as a way to kind of beat myself up?
Self-sabotage.
Yeah.
The queen of self-sabotage that lives in all of us. But so just remember that you can adjust your expectations and your numbers and what you're there to do. And if all you got out of this event was to work through this, that's amazing. Better than 100%. Any therapy. And that brings me back to this one last question. What keeps you sane? What are some of the supports that keep you with the trauma you've experienced? Because I always talk about trauma as my pet. My father was kidnapped about 18 years ago. And by far one of the most traumatizing things I experienced personally. And I was not the person in captivity. Yeah. And whether I like it or not, there are side effects to that. There's post-traumatic stress disorder that comes with it. And so throughout my own work, I always say, okay, my trauma is like my pet. It comes with me wherever I go. I can't potentially get rid of it and pretend it didn't happen. It's part of my story. It's shaped some of my behaviors and reactions to things. And from there, I would, just understand that it's not going away just because I did therapy or just because it's just part of my path. And obviously I have a team of people who help me and have helped me throughout the years. What do you do? What keeps you sane?
Oh, goodness. A lot of the things that I've mentioned kind of thus far, what I had mentioned to you before we went live is really just, I said, she said something about we're going to go somewhere, on this conversation. I said, it's okay. I've already had my therapy session this morning. So, therapy is something, I have a group of friends who we have to be transparent and vulnerable with, really helps. Nice. It's kind of our test group to we'll just bounce ideas off of each other and be like, does this sound sane? Is this normal? We have it's a very small group. There's 6 of us, but kind of my vulnerability group.
Yeah. I love that name.
It's what it is. Yeah. I tend to read a lot as well. So I always have a religious book. I always have a self-help book. And then I always have some sort of fun book going at all times.
That's awesome.
So that tends to help when things come up. I work with an intuitive healer who's actually over in Portugal. She's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So she'll go in and we'll do tapping and figure out what part of the tissue is still holding terror and anxiety. I've done something called Psyche. I've done Reiki and energy work, and you name it, I've probably done it.
Cool.
So I have kind of my arsenal of like, when I know something comes up, I know what's helped in the past, and then I just kind of will go to that source.
And so that highlights the awareness, and something that I coach my people on is notice why you're feeling better today. What, like, you didn't just wake up one morning like suddenly I feel better. So
I have no anxiety.
Yeah, I have no anxiety, and I don't know where that came from. So there's always a sequence of things that we do that make us feel better or worse, and being aware of that is amazing, because then, like you're saying, now you know what worked and you can tap back into that. Like, maybe I need some tapping today. Maybe it's Reiki. Maybe it's my therapist. And you have no shame in going into these places and just saying, hey, I am in need of you right at this moment.
Exactly.
That's so amazing.
It's cyclical too. So stuff will come up and then we'll, kind of squash it or work through it or whatever the case is. And then, another season, something else rolls up, and then, you have to kind of go rinse and repeat.
And again, I think this is such an important message for people to hear. Your life is not a continuum of goodness or bad luck, or it's always changing. The only thing that is constant is change. Memorize that, accept that, because the sooner you jump into that train of thought, the better you will be able to cope with whatever life is throwing at you. And I think that that's so valid to think, like, it's not, you're going through a happy phase, enjoy it. I'm going through an anxious phase, well, cope with it. It's going to come to an end. You're going through stressful time, like whatever it is that you are going through is simply a season, like Cassandra reminds us. Cassandra, just to leave, to let you go now, which I'm sad to.
I can come back.
Yes, because I want to talk about these breastfeeding cookies that you do.
Post baby, we'll do an episode, maybe.
Post baby. Once I'm like, what the heck? We're gonna eat these cookies. But what would you like to leave our listeners with? Like, if you had like maybe 3 main takeaways for people listening, who maybe they went through child abuse like yourself. Maybe they're wanting to start up a business. I don't know, maybe they went through a divorce, maybe something like that they're going through right now. And they're listening to you and like, how did you do this? Give me 3 things that I can apply today or that I can walk away with today. And I'm sorry if I'm putting you in the spot with that.
That's okay. These are the hardest questions, because I feel like I have to like go back and I'm like, what did I say? So I feel like first thing first is your past does not define who you are, who you're meant to be. So like, just get really, really clear on that and drop those titles that you were given. So if you were, told you were stupid, told you were dumb, told you had to be just a stay-at-home mom, told you, whatever the case is, you weren't pretty enough, you weren't thin enough, you were fill in the blanks. Everyone has them. So, I mean, really knowing that your past doesn't define who you were meant to be. So, and then getting in touch and really trying to start pulling back the layers and figuring out what it is you truly want. So if I like to say, if money is no object, if time was no object, if space was if there were no objections to what it is that you'd want, what is it that you'd want? And most people can't answer that question. They kind of hesitate because they've never actually explored that side, and they've never given themselves the permission to like think about what it is that would truly feel fulfilling to them.
Yeah.
So those are kind of like my parts A and part B.
I like it.
And then really kind of my part C, or, third piece of that would really be to start getting intentional with taking one small action step to get to that grand big vision of what it is that you'd want. So, if you want to be, a dancer or a rockette or whatever the heck it is, like whatever the heck it is as your vision, like maybe you start with the dance class. Maybe you just start walking. If you gained weight, you're no longer as fit as you once were. Like all of these kind of little pieces. I know, hand raised.
I'm raising my hand. What fit?
We love podcasts because we make faces. I talk with my hands. I'm hitting the mic. Like Olga's over here raising her hand, like preaching.
I'm like, amen, sister. I definitely could use some of those baby steps.
One small step each day or each week even to get to that higher vision that you hold yourself in.
Yeah.
And that could even be as simple as, I want to be a better mom. Well, cool. What would make you be a better mom? Like, would it be, maybe spending a little bit more time with yourself so you have a little more patience with your kids? Is it maybe, I'm joining an MLM for a little bit more cash flow so you can maybe take trips and make memory? Like, what is that for you? Really get clear on that.
I love that. Gaining clarity, sitting with yourself, like just becoming clear on what this image of what you want. This podcast is called Journey to Happy because I feel that I've walked myself through my own journey to get to a happier place. And I will always continue because happiness is not a forever state of mind.
Yeah.
Something that requires work.
It's a journey.
No, it's a journey. And you work at it I work at it every single day. I have to make a choice. Every day you make a choice in like the food I eat. This food didn't bring me happiness. Okay. What food will bring me happiness, right? It's like getting to that level of self-awareness, which I think is so important. But I love the perception of baby steps. I talk a lot about this because I'd rather people become sustainable in their efforts to be healthier and happier. So if you're listening to us from any of what we said, which we said so much, what will be one step, you guys, that you can take as of today, a baby step, to maybe get more clear on what happiness is to you, or what is it that you really want, like Cassandra was saying. If there was no constrictions at all, if the sky was the limit, what would you love to do for work, for family, for, what would that life look like? And then write it down.
I'm going to give you a little hint about what I do.
Yeah.
So I'll ask myself that question and I will set a timer and I will make myself write continuously for 20 minutes. And like, I have to keep writing. The pen has to keep moving for that 20 minutes so I can see what flows out and what comes out. Because generally when you're doing that, you like jot something down in 2 seconds and you're like, okay, move on to the next thing.
Right.
But if you were told to sit there and write and it could be 10 minutes or 20, whatever the case is. But if you were told to sit there, you start digging down through those layers. So you're like, you start at very surface and kind of get granular. It's that opposite. It's that upside down pyramid kind of funnel phase. So,
and I think there's something powerful about writing that it triggers more authenticity, or it triggers your memory to like, oh yeah, I used to love flowers, and maybe I want to do something with flowers. It just triggers your memory in some way that you don't usually would do just by thinking about it in your mind and not writing it, or by just telling somebody about it. Mm-hmm. Cassandra, where can people find you? If there's any entrepreneurs in here needing to be coached, or entrepreneurs who need some marketing strategies, where can they find you? What will be the easiest way to follow you, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, so my online home is cassandrashuck.com, and I'm sure that Olga will link it in the podcast below. It has links to all my other businesses on there as well as my own podcast. It also has a link to a free Facebook group that I run, where there's some free business kind of coaching and mentorship in there. And that's kind of my one-stop shop of a digital home. It links to Facebook group, it links to Instagram group, it links to all the things.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So yes, that will definitely be tagged in this podcast. For any of you listening, if you've got things to tell us, please write them down in the review section of my podcast. I would absolutely love to keep bringing people such as Cassandra into a podcast, and having reviews actually help us make it places, so that when I invite people, they look into my podcast and they see, okay, it's true. She's legit. People listen to this podcast.
Exactly.
So do me a huge favor. And after you're done listening to this podcast, leave a review, an honest review. I'm not asking for 5 stars if that's not what you're feeling, but let us know what you think. And if you found this helpful, also share with other people, because there's a lot of wisdom in Cassandra's mind, and we were really blessed to have her in the podcast, sharing her life, her story, her light, and you're brilliant, Cassandra. I am really honored to have met you, and really honored to have had you share your story with all of us here. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.